Have you ever struggled with motivation in your life? Do you ever struggle with, having the drive to do things that you want to do? And you look around to people, maybe you feel envious of them. I think maybe me and Antonia at times in our life have probably felt envious of these same people. Those people they get so much done. They have so much output in life. And I'm not just talking about crossing off tasks. I'm talking about they pursue their dreams. They go after the things they want. And I think they're very inspiring to us, but also they can sometimes make us feel a little bad about ourselves if we're not as motivated as maybe they are. Have you ever struggled with this before in your life? Where you look at others and you're like, oh, I wish I was more motivated like they are.
I envy people who are motivated to take care of mundane tasks. People who feel, people who feel that, people who take care of, it almost feels like they're taking care of every corner of their lives. They're really balanced.
Yes.
And they feel like they have
yes.
work and family and taking care of their home, and they have all the things handled, right? Like everything seems to be in balance. But I also know that is a fantasy, that when I look at other people that feel like they're accomplishing all of their everything that they need to do, all the tasks, that they are probably handling things that I struggle to handle, which is why I'm noticing it. Yeah. I'm noticing that they're taking care of and are motivated to do things that I really struggle to take care of, and I'm not seeing the areas that they're struggling in. So I think that's closer to what it is for me. I don't lack motivation for the things I like to do. I lack motivation for the things that I don't like to do. And when somebody has motivation to accomplish the things that I'm not particularly interested in, then yes, envy is an emergent.
I have a friend who's highly motivated, has a lot of stuff done in his life, and I was very envious for years until I peeled back the curtain. I realized, his relationships are kind of a mess. He's getting a lot done. He's accomplishing business goals and output in his life, but he's got a lot of challenges with relationships. They're not working real well for him. Some of his family dynamics are in turmoil. And so if I'm only looking at that slice of life, like what's presented maybe on Instagram or Pinterest or some other social media platform, I might think, that person's got it all together. But then you peel back that layer, you're like, they do have some stuff they struggle with. We probably all do this.
Well, and it's not about trying to find somebody's Achilles heel, right? Where it's not about going, well, you suck in this area of life, so it makes it okay that I suck in these other areas of life. It's not intended to find other people's weak points. Although I do think that there is something about that allows us to gain some perspective, which is that nobody has all the bases covered.
Yeah.
Like everybody is struggling in some way. Some people are more capable and adept at covering the bases in the external world, so that's not as obvious to outsiders. And some people have an easier time of covering the bases in the internal world, but struggle in the external world, and that's a little easier to see the weak points. But that said, I think that this is all tied to, in personality typology theory, a concept that I would call intrinsic reward. Now, intrinsic reward is not just in personality typology theory, but the concept of intrinsic reward is that there are certain things that we just get a chemical hit when we do or think about or experience. There are some things that give us a major reward just by engaging and interacting with them. And it almost feels like we are fated to like the things we like. Like we almost can't, we don't choose them, right? We like what we like, and that's just what we know. So
what's the phrase, the wand chooses the wizard?
Yeah.
Sort of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. The wand chooses the wizard when it comes to most things, including interests and motivation and all the things that we're trying to make happen when we are attempting to create a balance in our lives. And so in type theory, this is where it matches up to type theory, is that intrinsic reward can be almost one-to-one correlated with our pre-wiring, our cognitive pre-wiring. How we are sort of genetically predisposed, one could say, or DNA level predisposed to pay attention to certain elements of life and to get a chemical reward or to get an intrinsic reward whenever we engage with that aspect of life. And so people who have an intrinsic reward system that matches society's expectations of them, they're the obvious people that we envy, right? They seem like they have it all figured out. They feel like they have all of their, ducks in a row. And so it's very easy to envy those kinds of people. But then there's other personality types that are intrinsically rewarded for things that are more subtle, more internal. things that require a little bit more space and distance from societal expectations. There are things like rumination and introspection and focusing on what we believe and think and feel. Yeah. So when somebody is pre-wired to be intrinsically rewarded by more subtle activities and thoughts, those are usually people who make the statement, I struggle with motivation. Yeah. And I always think, well, I don't think you struggle with motivation. I think you struggle with motivation to handle the things that are expected of you by the outside world, whether that be work expectations or social expectations or whatever. And so most of us don't actually struggle with motivation and simultaneously also struggle with motivation.
Yeah, we're assuming that you're not finding yourself in like a depressed state where you don't have any motivation for anything. You're like a basically healthy person in a lot of ways, and you're not necessarily motivated by the things that are quote unquote on paper you're supposed to be motivated by. It's more nuanced for you, right? Well, if you're a baseline of health.
Yeah, like baseline of health. Yeah, exactly. When you're not like really struggling with something that might be massively undermining or really truly terrible time in your life.
You might be one-sided on your personality, the way your personality has shown up for you in your life, and you still might be a baseline of health. Right. One-sidedness doesn't necessarily mean unhealthiness.
Right.
It could just be one-sidedness in your personality.
Right. And one-sidedness means that you're only going to get reward for a very small slice of activities, and you're going to, everything that doesn't fit in that, you're going to kick those cans as far down the road as possible. And so when we learn about our personality type, one of the major ahas that happen is we get a systemic explanation for why we are intrinsically motivated and intrinsically rewarded for certain activities and not other activities. Yeah. And oftentimes this is a major aha. I mean, at the very, very, very baseline, you can hear introverts say things like, there was something totally different about me. I'm an introvert. I'm just not intended to be somebody who's constantly presenting myself to the world and putting myself out there and engaging and interacting with the environment all the time and getting energy from that. So that is one very nice emergent that comes from understanding one's personality, is we start to get an idea of how we are motivated, or at least wired to experience the world. Now, when you go a layer under and you get to our cognitive preferences, right, not just our dichotomy level like introvert, extrovert, sensing, intuition in the Myers-Briggs system, thinking, feeling, and judging and perceiving, when you get to the layer of what are called Jungian cognitive functions, now we've got 8 different cognitive abilities that we are pre-wired to be more and less engaged with, or intrinsically rewarded for engaging with. And our observation has been that the association we make with this cognitive wiring and our relationship to both the outside world and the inner world is not an accident. It's almost as if there are sort of 8 arenas of life that we're all expected to engage and interact with, and on some level be good at, right? The expectation is that we're going to handle all of these arenas and we're going to have them beautifully balanced. And so the areas that we are imbalanced in, the areas that we are not pre-wired to focus on, we tend to blow those up and turn them into big deals. We put a lot of weight on those things because those are the areas that are causing us pain points. Yeah. The areas in which we are pre-wired to be good at, we tend to marginalize those things and act like, well, everybody's good at those, right? You know, that's not a big deal because everybody can handle that.
Or we judge people that aren't good at it. That's the other thing we can do. We can make it not that big of a deal. Or we can make it a huge deal.
Right.
We can make it like, well, I'm good at this, everybody else sucks at it, right?
Well, I think actually what it is it's easy to be good at this, and so if you're not, you must be lazy or disingenuous, or, you know, there must be something wrong with you, because any normal person would be good at this thing that I'm pre-wired to be good at. So yeah, we end up marginalizing it, making no big deal, and I think that judging of others that aren't good at it is part of the marginalization, right? It's part of acting like that's no big deal. So there are effectively sort of 8 elements of life that could be archetypal elements of life that are almost macrocosms of these cognitive function microcosms. Like the individual experience we have with these functions is in some way mirrored with like these slices of life, right? They have a relationship to each other.
I want to pause you there for just a second. I want you to land this for yourself. If you get nothing else out of this video, we all overvalue our own experience. all of us, myself, Antonia, you, all of us overvalue the experience we have in the world. And we assume other people are having that experience too, right? That's basically what we're talking about, is we overvalue whether it's easy, it's hard, whatever it is. We think that that's how other people are experiencing the world too. Even if we cognitively know. You might watch videos like this all the time. You might know personality type, might know how people are wired. It doesn't matter. You're still going to overvalue your own experience. It's just human nature to do so.
Right.
Type can help, understanding of other people can help, but it's just natural to how we process things as humans.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the biggest gifts that type gives us, is this awareness and understanding of the differences between how we are wired, right? The differences between how we show up. And I would say what Carl Jung called the beginning of individuation, which is, oh, I have a different dominant or driver cognitive function from everybody else. That actually makes me different, and that's a major aha. But we're going to go one level deeper and talk about this cognition, not in just a sense of, oh, I'm overvaluing my experience, or, oh yeah, other people are wired differently than me. We want to go one layer deeper, which is a connection point to understanding how we're wired and our relationship to reality, effectively, right? So if I'm cognitively pre-wired to be focused on just a small subset of elements of reality, you could call them, or slices of life, if I'm pre-wired to just focus on a couple of those, I'm probably going to be pretty great with those few. And I'm not going to be so great with the other ones. And I'm going to spend my life focused, if I can get away with, constantly and perpetually be focusing on those areas that I'm good at and give me intrinsic reward. And I'm going to do everything in my power to outsource, ignore, neglect, procrastinate, all these other areas that I'm not so great with. And that's just human nature, right? So if
I'm laughing
we're,
because I know I do this.
Yeah, I mean, that's humans, right? We're humaning, and that's what we do when we human. And so I think what the important component in all of this is if we're expected to be all things to all people, which of course we never can be, what do we do about all of the areas of life that we have, that other people have expectations of us around? Like, it's not like if I'm bad at that thing, people go, oh, it's okay, they're bad at that, don't worry about it. I mean, sometimes that happens. Sometimes we're highly enabled to feel that way. And then we get more and more, as Joel mentioned earlier, one-sided, right? And now we have this huge chasm between the things we're good at and the things we're not so good at. But most of the time, people don't give us that much of a break. They're just not like, oh, it's okay to be terrible at relationships. We'll all just be your friend anyway, right? People don't do that. They go, oh, you're terrible at relationships, so now you don't have them, right? Or you're terrible at building resource, so now you don't have a way to make money, right? People don't just forgive those things. So how do we not only identify what we're good at and get intrinsic reward in and maximize the impact of those things, but how do we determine what our relationship is with all these other elements of life? So we've pared down these ideas into just little concepts. We're starting a program called the Personality Life Path, which is it's an online digital course of live meetings, live workshops that culminate in a live event, not virtual, a live event. And what we're going to do is we're going to take each week and go into one of these Jungian cognitive functions and really fillet out absolutely every square inch of that function. What elements of life are represented by this cognitive function? What are the expectations we have to be good at this function? And for those of you that it's one of your, preferred functions, you'll be able to figure out how to maximize it in your life, how to not leave money on the table by understanding how to fully develop it and recognize all the ways in which you're great at this thing, and maybe even have your purpose around stewarding this element of life, meaning not just using it for yourself, but also to be an advocate of it for everybody else. Like, how do you become the best representative of that element of life? But then we're also going to go into functions that aren't your preference. And we're going to ask questions like, what should your relationship with that be? Should you be integrating it? Should it be something that you are paying more attention to? Is it something that would allow you to have more balance if you really dive into this component of life? Or is it something that actually should be outsourced? Or maybe something that you should be looking for tools, resources, and people that will help support and subsidize your relationship with this element of life. And so there are 8 of them, and we're pre-wired to only really be consciously aware of about 3 of them. Sometimes if we've done a little bit of personal growth work, 4 of them. there's 4 elements that are just sitting there waiting for us to pay them attention. And sometimes those elements are the ones that have really pulled us into dark places. But even with the elements of life that we're pre-wired to pay attention to, sometimes those can be bugaboos in our lives. Sometimes those can be real challenges in our relationship to them. And so in this Personality Life Path program, we're going to talk about 8 different slices of life that are important to master, important to create a relationship with, and important to understand what our relationship to those elements are.
Yeah. We're always looking for ways to help you apply an understanding of personality type to your life, to see real changes. We believe that true learning equals behavior change. And so often people come into personality types, they learn the 4-letter code, the dichotomies, right? Introvert versus extrovert, sensor versus intuitive. They find out how they're set up as a personality with those 4 letters. And then the next level is usually understanding the cognitive wiring of the mind, how you're learning information or perceiving your world, how you're judging or evaluating that information, making decisions. And that could be a huge benefit to apply things to your life. It can give you great growth paths and all that. We actually want to go one layer even deeper than that in this program. We want to go down to almost the archetypical energy level that lives underneath each of these cognitive functions. Whether they're in your personality or not, we love for you to be awakened to all 8 of them in the reality that you move through every day. Because we have to engage with these archetypical energies of life, whether we're wired for them or not. Like, it's just a requirement. I might not have extroverted sensing or sensation in my car model or my cognitive function stack, what's technically called a cognitive function stack. And yet, I still have to walk on the ground. I still have to be present to the moment. I still have to touch and feel and taste and be in my senses and go through my life accessing this slice of reality. Well, what do I do if I'm a personality type, which I'm not, wired to necessarily focus on that as a strength? How do I manage that in my life? Do I ignore it? Do I delegate it? Do I find mitigation strategies? Are there tools and things that we can develop? Well, this is what we want to work with you on. We've been teaching and coaching people over the last several years on how to tap into some of these archetypical energies, awaken them in themselves, understand their limitations for how they're wired as a person, to be able to move through the world as a well-rounded, holistic person.
Yeah. So Joel gave a single example, but I would like to go through just sort of an element of each of these 8 quote-unquote slices of life to bring things a little bit more concrete and less abstract.
Yeah.
So just in a small encapsulation, each of these areas of life are something that is critical and important for us to at least understand what our relationship to them is, regardless of whether or not we develop them. Joel mentioned extroverted sensing, what we call sensation. This is an element of life that understands the importance of experience. It understands the importance of feeling max aliveness, of being in the game, not just observing the game, of taking care of things quickly and getting on them fast, of having a good reaction to elements that are happening to you, meaning that getting a sense of how one should be navigating in real time and in an experience that they're having. It's an understanding of the importance of the moment and being in the flow of things, basically in the flow of the universe. There's also opportunities that come with this function or this part of life. Opportunities to be able to, see when it's time for you to engage versus time for you to wait for other people to engage with you. And it's a source of generative energy. It's a place where we can take care of ourselves and generate energy to have those experiences. It's other attitudinal side, the technical name is attitudinal side of that, is introverted sensing, or what we call memory. And this is an importance of understanding where we've come from. It's an understanding of the continuity of our lives and how we have been influenced by the past, whether it's our past or the past of all humans, right? It could be social past, it could be cultural past, it could be family lineage, it could be where we came from as humans in the long lineage of our species. It is an understanding of how who and what we are today has been influenced by where we came from. And it's an understanding of the importance to continue that. It's continuity. It's understanding of rhythms, seasons, an awareness of where we came from is part of what is charting where we're going. And it's really critical and crucial for developing things like self-confidence, because self-confidence is the product of overcoming obstacles and then taking an accounting of that. If we never tap into where we came from, we'll never be able to build things like self-confidence, self-trust, self-esteem, because we'll forget how we behaved in past experiences. So ruminating on the past is critical for us to become whole people now. Both of these elements of life could be considered very grounding for us. They're more concrete. They require experiences and examples. They require us to understand things in the real world, not just in fantasies or abstractions. So they're very grounding elements, and it's important to understand what our relationship is to both of these functions and both of these slices of life, because we could be leaving money on the table, right? We could be leaving self-confidence on the table by simply avoiding ruminating on our past experiences. We could be leaving a feeling of aliveness on the table because we choose not to engage in the moment. So, like you said, you're not really wired to be somebody who focuses on either of those things. But how do you get the benefits of them if you're not pre-wired to focus on them, which is a major part of what we're going to talk about in the Personality Life Path program. Now, you could say one more layer up of concreteness is the thinking level, which is where we build the systems of our lives. So the introverted thinking or accuracy cognitive function piece could be a representative of our thoughts, our beliefs, our desire to continue to become more and more skilled, competent, and closer to the true nature of who we are. This is a function that focuses on truth, right? It wants truth at all costs. And part of that truth is the truth of who we were meant to be. And so this is a piece of us that pushes us. There's a critical nature to it, not to undermine our self-esteem, but to make sure that we're always getting the highest quality information in, that we are not being had, right? We're not falling for false promises or anything that is a lie.
We're not lying to ourselves.
We're not lying to ourselves. We're not falling for our own fantasies. And on top of that, we're not departing from our true nature, which is one of great competence and skill and performance. And so this is a part of us that is a pushing voice inside of us. It wants us to continue to do better. Now, if you have this function or you are pre-wired to focus on this component of life, then this voice inside of you it's not a critical spirit, it's a friend. It allows you to navigate your life and constantly be looking for leverage points and ways to optimize your performance. But if this is something that falls further down the stack for you, it can turn into almost the voice of an enemy. It can sound like it's constantly not letting up, perfectionism, critical spirit, being judgmental of self and others. So how do you make sure that as you engage with this component, that it's not undermining everything, that it's actually buoying you up? What's the relationship you should have with this part of life that pushes you to excellence? The other thinking function is extroverted thinking or effectiveness. This is about taking those same concepts and applying them to the outside world. It's about implementation, and it's looking for opportunities to make things happen. And it's looking for pass-fail criteria. Now, what's really important about this component is that it is massively tapped into resource and resource management, because getting things done, making things happen require large amounts of resource management to balance it all. And so when we don't have this element of our lives, sort of handled or understand our relationship to it, this is when we feel like we just cannot get our resource managed. We can't make money. We can't seem to build career capital. We can't seem to push ourselves to do the next thing. It's also associated with pushing ourselves to the next level, excellence in performance, trying to make things happen in a big way, and getting the intrinsic reward of making it happen and nailing that goal.
So you can already, before we go to the next four, I just want to highlight, you can already probably map motivations to each of these energies of life. If you're a person that's wired for one of these, already you can start to go, yes, I'm more intrinsically motivated for that, maybe for truth, like we talked about introverted thinking or accuracy, than I am for getting projects done in the outer world. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're reverse. Maybe you're more intrinsically motivated to accomplish things than you are just refining your thoughts and beliefs all the time. So just be looking, as we talk about the next four energies too, of how this connects to you in motivation.
Right. So the next layer up is a softer layer. It's a place of skills that we're expected to have. And when we don't have them, we get a lot of social feedback. or relational feedback that we are failing in these areas, and yet they're less concrete components of life. These are the feeling components. It's our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to other people. Introverted feeling or authenticity is the slice of life that understands our identity, who we are, how things are impacting us on a deep core marrow level, right? We're all the way inside. It also taps into our motivations and intentions as people, not the concept of what motivates us and is able to, sort of hack that and get motivated by anything. Although every once in a while you can see somebody who uses this function well has figured that piece out. But it's more understanding what desires you're motivated by. What is the thing that's really pushing you, really pulling you, and other people? What is motivating them? It's about reaching into what really means something to us and our convictions, the things that we value as people, and what we believe is right and wrong, even if that's a little, murky, right? Even if that's not black and white. When you have this as a function that translates to the outside world, these people are usually very in touch with expression, art, but oftentimes they're really tapped into the human experience. And so they're good at listening to other people. They often make fantastic friends. They often make people who are good at counseling other people. And that being tapped into one's emotions means that when there's an emotion to process, it doesn't automatically get buried. It doesn't automatically get suppressed. It's one that gets honored and seen. While there are some functions that are more celebrated in society, this is one you can tell that society is really starting to pay attention to, right? It's really starting to pay attention to the importance of our emotional health, of making sure that we're not burying our feelings alive, that we're actually tapping into these components of who we are and understanding our identity. The other side of that is a function called extroverted feeling or harmony. And this is about connection with other people. It's about understanding the energetic interchange between human beings and how one person's energy impacts another person's energy. At its core baseline, it could even be wordless. You could even call it a vibe between people. It's the instinctive understanding that somebody is around. Somebody is in your arena. Somebody is another person that you could build connection with. Now, what ends up coming from all of this is an understanding and awareness of interpersonal dynamics. If you are vibing with another person, if you're energetically connecting with them, where do you end and where do they start, and vice versa? And so here is where boundaries are created. Here is where an understanding of relationships are created, and a focus on getting needs met. Because if you're sensitive to another person's vibe, if you're sensitive to their energy, you're going to want them to be in a good vibe and a good energy. You won't want them to bring negativity to you. You're going to want to get their need met so that it increases their energy and you can be in a good energetic connection. And then this turns into an entire understanding of global dynamics, an understanding of how things interrelate as it relates to humans on large cultural impacted ways, all the way down to family dynamics.
Yeah. Some people are wired for this naturally. They get it. They got the memo. You might be a person that got the memo and you understand how this works. Or maybe you're wired and this is a little more challenging for you, and yet you still have to interface with people. We all have to have human relationships and dynamics. Unless you're a hermit living in the woods, isolated away from all other humanity, you have to figure this piece out and move through the world anyway. So I think all of us need to attune to some of these things, whether or not they're in our cognition or not, whether we're wired naturally for them or not.
Right. Yeah. Relationships not being in your wheelhouse doesn't mean you suddenly don't actually care about them. Right? Like, even if you say you don't care, like, we're humans, right? What does Jonathan Haidt call us? 90% ape and 10% bee. There's a part of us that's just part of this, like, sort of ansible of connectivity with all human beings. So when this is not in your wheelhouse, you feel it. And then finally, the least concrete component is our intuitive relationship, or our relationship to the patterns of life, our relationship to our imagination, and our relationship to the things that pull us into the future. On one side is extroverted intuition, or what we call exploration. And this slice of life is about opportunities and possibilities. It's about understanding things through brainstorm conversations and seeing how things interrelate and connect on a global level. Not just humans interconnected, but humans, things, ideas, concepts, everything has a relationship with each other. And while this one might feel like it's the easiest to neglect or ignore, or it's not that needed, the truth is that people who have this as a strength end up being people who tap into mysteries of life. They start to understand them by engaging and interacting with the outside world, and being able to spot those possibilities and patterns push us technologically forward, and they also push us into disruptive technologies. This function is all about understanding disruption. And so because of that, every opportunity is a disruption, right? It's going to disrupt your life if you choose to take it. And if you are blind to this component, you might have opportunities right in front of you that you simply cannot see because you edit them out, because you're editing out disruptions. You're editing out things that you might think are noise, and yet they might be the path that you're supposed to be on. This component of being able to understand all of the possibilities, being able to problem solve creatively, being able to get outside the box in your thinking. This is a piece that actually in modern day, I believe, is a lot more valued. And in the past, it was valued for its inventiveness.
Well, I just want to make a comment on that. Things happen so fast in our world. Sometimes people that are wired for this can catch up and keep up with all the newness of life. Our technology is doubling all the time. Things are happening quickly. Changes are happening. And people that are wired this way, they have a tendency to be able to keep up with that. People that are not wired this way sometimes struggle, and they feel like they're always behind. And like, how do I adjust to things that are new that disrupt my life continually over and over and over again? Right. So there's ways you can stretch and work with this energy if it's not natural to you.
Right. And then finally, there's an energy of introverted intuition, or what we call perspectives. And this is about understanding implications. It's about understanding how things are working and the nature of those things. Observation, really getting into the system that creates these patterns. And so the ability to run simulations in one's mind around how these systems operate and work allows a person to run simulations into the future and determine what is the most probable path forward, what is the most likely going to happen. So there's a bit of predictive element to it, but it also spots opportunities. It also creates a rich imagination of how things could be, and it seeks to employ those things in the outside world in order to understand one's purpose, one's message, to create meaning. And it's also tapped into narrative. It's tapped into the story of our lives and our own purpose. And while this highest level, most abstract component might feel that it's less necessary than the more concrete components, obviously if you don't have the concrete components dialed in, you don't have anything that's built on top of it. But by the time you get to these top level, if you have the space for it and you're unable to tap into those energies, this is when we start to feel lost. This is when we start to lack purpose. We stop seeing the opportunities that are presented in front of us. And if we don't feel we have permission to tap into those, even if we're pre-wired to look at them and to master those components, if we don't have permission, we'll still feel lost. We still won't know what the narrative of our lives is intended to be.
Yeah. So
these different areas, these slices of life, are far more complex than what I just described. All right, they're very layered.
They go way deeper.
3-dimensional. 4-dimensional if you add the component of time, right? Yeah. They go way, way deeper. And every single element is something that we're expected to have mastered. And when we don't, we feel it. When we lack purpose, we feel it. When we lack relationships, we feel it. When we lack resource, we feel it. When we don't process our emotions, we feel that. When we don't have a good relationship with our competence, capability, skill, and our true beliefs, right? The things that are true for us, we feel that. We get a byproduct of all of these functions. So what is your relationship to each of them? How can you better steward and maximize the areas of life that you are pre-wired to engage with? And how can you build a better, healthier relationship with all of the other slices of life that you have varying levels of access to, adaptability towards, and capability of building relationship around? What is that for you? So what Joel and I would like to do in the next video is talk a little bit about a life audit. How do you determine what your relationship is? How can you tap into these energies? And if you're interested in all of the things that we're talking about, we're putting together a program called the Personality Life Path. It's intended to help you not just have a "you are here" dot of your personality type, but create a map to where you're going, to understand what ultimately is your direction, and to map out all of the paths that you need to take in order to get to the healthiest version of yourself.
And we've actually created this mentorship specifically going through just the same way Antonia articulated these different energies. We start with the most concrete to lay a foundation, and we work up week after week. We take one of those energies and we isolate it, we learn all about it, we take it in, we reflect on it, we have discussion, and then we actually give you action steps to go out and test this in the real world to see how it shows up for you, whether or not it's in your personality, to get a sense of this energy in your life and it's surrounding you, so you can have a reference experience of that energy to reflect on, to make a game plan to get where you want. And we end with that last energy, the meaning making, the story narrative of your life, right? We're working toward the foundation, working up, and hopefully at the end of this program, our goal for you is for you to have a map of where you're going in life, an actual life path that you can follow based on your wiring and the energies you have to engage with in life in your wiring. So we'd love to invite you to be part of that program. You can find the link probably around this video to join it, engage with it. If you're watching this video in the future, after the initial launch of this program, you can probably go to our website, personalityhacker.com, and you can look and see what other offerings we have. Or we might be offering the same program again in the future on a certain date in the future. This is a very live, high-touch program with myself and Antonia personally engaged. So we'd love you to be part of it. And stay tuned for the next video as we talk about auditing your life.